welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you for joining me every single upload. They have been less frequent, I feel. I had that flu that made me lose a week, and then now I feel like I'm like, oh my God, constantly playing catch up. But we're gonna get back into the new swing of things, more consistency. Like we were finishing off the end of the year. I was loving that. Also, a couple updates. We have a new book for book club. It is The Coworker by Frida McFadden. I will probably already be done the book by the time this video goes live because I cannot put it down, and I read like half of it in one sitting. So that's exciting. The meetup for that will be virtually on Zoom on Saturday, February 10th. I want to say whatever February 10th is, I believe it's a Saturday. That will be then. And then what else did I have? I had another update. Oh my God, Spotify. So for all of the podcast listeners, you can now listen to episodes on Spotify. I am so thankful to Spotify and Jelly Smack for this opportunity of putting everything on there for me. Sincerely so grateful, and so grateful for all of you for constantly just supporting me and just always rooting me on with every kind of new opportunity and venture I'm given. I'm really so thankful for you. We are going to get right into it today. Thank you for holding on for all of those messages. Before we do, I do have one more quick one for you, so bear with me. Today's case is super important, has a very big call to action since I was able to actually speak with the victim's daughter. So yeah, please stick around. I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor today, Fume, one of my fave sponsors. If you guys have been here for a little bit, you know that I'm so thankful to Fume, not only for sponsoring the channel, obviously, but for them assisting me, helping me, supporting me in my journey of, breaking up with destructive habits. I love seeing the comments of all of the love that you guys have also been sending Fume if you have tried them out and also been so happy like I am. If you have never heard about Fume, let me get you caught up. Fume is an innovative, award-winning device that helps with what can be a very stressful transition of breaking up with your bad habits and just makes it a much more enjoyable and attainable process. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. There is no vapor. Instead, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. I personally fell in love with the crisp mint, which surprised me because I'm not a mint gal, in my day-to-day life. But apparently when it comes to the Fume, there was just something about that completely clicked. Prior to that, I definitely liked the orange vanilla. I still think that the orange vanilla has nice, but there was just something about that crisp mint that took that satisfaction to the next level, if that makes sense. Another thing I really love about it is that it's got a fidget aspect to it, and I'm laughing at myself because I am looking in front of me and cannot see my Fume. I love to fidget with it, but I remember my sister was here a couple days ago and she had informed me that she has picked up a little bit of a habit that she would like to get rid of, and I suggested my Fume. I was like, use my Fume, see if you like it. Not really meaning take it if you like it, but it does not surprise me that she would do something like that. So now I have to be like, I hope you, enjoyed. May you please return, and then I will help purchase one for you if this is the route you would like to go, ma'am, because I just love fidgeting with it. And right now, sitting here, I'm just so used to it, and I just kind of feel like I'm without my buddy. Fume has served over 150,000 customers. Clearly, I am one of them and very proud to be, and there is no reason that you can't be either. You can now also upgrade your journey pack to the Solano to enjoy that premium walnut barrel and that sexy onyx black coated mouthpiece, and that has a little bit of a smoother finish. I think it looks really pretty. I love both of them. I'm very impartial, but the Solano definitely has that je ne sais quoi about it. If you want to check it out, head on over to tryfume.com/SherrilynDale, or you can scan the QR code and use my code SherrilynDale to get 10% off when you purchase the journey pack today. Once again, that is tryfum.com and use my code SherrilynDale to save an additional 10% off of your order today. Thank you again so much, Fume, for all you have done for me and for sponsoring the video and your continued support on my channel. I really appreciate it so much. Okay, let's get into it. Like I said, this case came to my attention when the victim's daughter actually went viral on TikTok. It wasn't TikTok. When she was talking about her mom's case, and I immediately was so drawn to not only the case, but just the vulnerability of Nikki, who is the daughter of the woman that we are going to be talking today. She is fighting for justice for her mother, Stephanie Wasilish. And she has just become one of my favorites to watch. I am honored to have gotten the chance to actually get on a call with her and hopefully help her get some movement in her mom's case. Like I said, there is a huge call to action here, one that you can actually be a part of and get recognition in a documentary for. So stay tuned for the video for that. It was early in the morning of July 9th, 1993 that Nikkis Wasilish's life at only 10 years old changed indefinitely. It was the first day of a 30-year-old fight for justice for her mom, Stephanie Marie Wasilish. At 1:40 a.m., a 911 call came through from a home on Coffee Pot Drive. The caller was a 31-year-old Russell Peterson, and he was calling to report a shooting at the home that he shared with his common-law wife, 32-year-old Stephanie Wasilish, and that she was injured.
911, what's your emergency?
I need help.
What kind of help, sir?
There has been a very bad accident. Me and my wife, we were in an argument, and she's hurt. She's hurt very bad. I need help.
Okay, what's wrong with her?
She's been shot.
She was shot?
Yes.
Who shot her?
We were... I don't know who.
You don't know who shot her?
She might have shot herself.
Mr. Peterson, where is she shot? For me?
It looks like she's been shot in the neck or the chest.
Stephanie Marie Wasilish, who liked to be called Stacy, was born a fraternal twin. She and her brother Stephen were born on June 1st, 1961 to their parents, Harry and Bernice, in Chicago, Illinois. They were the babies at the time with 4 older siblings, 2 sisters and 2 brothers. Sadly, her twin brother passed away at only 9 months old, and shortly after his death, there was actually another baby that came to the family. A baby girl was born. Her name was Wendy, and because Wendy and Stacy were so close in age, they almost grew up feeling like twins. Stephen's death was obviously and understandably a very difficult event that happened within the family. And according to Nikki and accounts from other family members, this was something that would always follow Stacy and lead her to feel like she had been treated differently by her mother because she felt her own mother was resentful that she had survived and that her twin brother didn't. I got the impression speaking with Nikki that Stacy was just a very passionate person. Whether it was being in love, in friendship, goals, interests, poured everything into whatever she was doing and was like very focused on it. And something that she was very passionate about was having a family and having children of her own that she could just love and spoil, even at a young age. And in the early 80s, she fell in love with a young man named Craig Daly. And at 19 years old, she got pregnant. And this is something she was really happy about. Having been pregnant at 19 myself, I know that that is a really scary situation to happen, and Stacy seemed to just take it head on and really with a lot of excitement. She was really happy. Those who knew her said all she really wanted in life was to have a child, specifically a daughter, and she had a daughter, Nikki, in 1982. Now, this was not the plan for Craig. They were young and he was not ready to settle down. So when Stacy met a very charming, captivating chef named Russell Peterson, who is telling her that he wants all of the same things she does, specifically when it comes to a family, Stacy was smitten. The two of them worked together in the kitchen at the Sheraton Crescent Hotel in Phoenix, Arizona, and fell in love for a couple of years. This really was everything that she was wanting and what he had basically told her to expect. They were happy. They moved around California for work opportunities, and he even taught her how to cook all of the pastries so that they could work together as a team. In 1989, they also added to their family and had a daughter named Christina. Again, this to Stacy was such a gift, and Nikki remembers just her mom wanting them to have everything in life that she didn't. Nikki describes herself as like their Barbies. They had the cutest clothes, the trendy Disney bedding, boom boxes, for 6.5 years on the outside, everything appeared to be really great between Stacy and Russell. So how did it go wrong? Now, while things on the outside appeared that they were a happy family, in the early 90s, the relationship started to deteriorate. It was to the point where Stacy was speaking to her sister Wendy on a nightly basis about how unhappy she was. There were allegations of abuse, and Stacy was basically saying that she was feeling like a single mother, raising her girls alone while Russell left very early in the morning to go to work and returned late at night. And that was pretty much the foundation of the day and evening of July 8th. Russell still wasn't home around 11 p.m. when Nikki remembers giving her mom a hug and a kiss goodnight. And she remembers distinctly Stacy asking her if she brushed her teeth like she did every night. She told her mom yes, but it was a lie. She didn't. This is why I love Nikki. I think she is so relatable when she tells her story and talks about her mother and just looking back in those days and those times. And maybe it's just because we're similar in age, but when she's talking about her 101 Dalmatian bedding, she's just exactly the type of person that needs people to listen because it humanizes her family, her mom, which is exactly what the purpose of this content should do. Nikki describes crawling into bed that night, and she said at this time of her life, like the only thing that she was thinking about or focused on was anticipating her 11th birthday that was coming up in 17 days. She was in grade 5 and was so excited that her mom said that she was going to be getting a TV for her, brand new grown-up kid room, which she got when they moved into the house on Coffee Pot Drive. The garage was actually converted into a bedroom specifically for Nikki. She said that she did hear Russell come home about 15 minutes after she went to bed, and then she had drifted off to sleep with absolutely no idea that in almost 2 hours she was going to be awoken to a real life nightmare. It was the Sedona Police Department that responded to the 911 call from Russell Peterson, and when they arrived on scene, they found Stacy fatally wounded in the bedroom with a gunshot wound to her neck. I was reading through the case file, and it was pretty alarming that the police in their reports were walking through those moments. And when they walked into the bedroom, not only was Stacy in there, but Russell and her youngest daughter, 4-year-old Christina, was also in the bedroom. She was on her parents' bed. And when the officers entered the room, she's pointing at her mom saying, "That's my mommy." And keep in mind, like, the scene it's pretty alarming. Stacy's described as being in front of the closet with a great deal of blood around her head, and little Christina is just sitting in the bedroom on the bed. Now, when police arrive, she's immediately removed from the bedroom, and at this point, Nikki remembers being woken up by not police officers per se, but their flashlights is what she distinctly remembers being kind of in her face. And then as she comes to, she sees police officers there. They're asking her to get dressed, and they told Nikki that there was a fight between her parents and that her mom had left the house. So after getting dressed, Nikki and her sister are taken to the police car, and as they're walking out of the home to the police car outside, she remembers seeing Russell sitting in the living room on the couch, and he had blood on his hands and he's rocking back and forth. And at this moment she thought, okay, like this is not, just like a fight. There is something really wrong here. It's at this moment that Nikki and Christina get put into the police car, and she hears her sister repeating to her, "Poppy killed mommy. Poppy killed mommy. Poppy killed mommy." Poppy is what she called Russell, her dad. And Nikki's horrified at hearing this because she's just been told by the police that there was a fight. She's triggered because she has, seen a really disturbing scene in the living room. And she's just like, oh my God, like what is going on? Trying to process everything. She's like, no, he didn't. Like, don't say that. Don't say that. Now, this would be something that Christina repeats numerous times to multiple people, not just this evening. Russell's initial statement in the house was that there was an altercation between him and Stacy that evening, and it started not long after he arrived home from work around 11:15 that evening. And he said when he got home, Stacy was intoxicated. He doesn't say that, coming home and finding her like that had anything to do with the argument. In fact, he also had some drinks with Stacy. And then he said that while they were hanging out, having drinks, she told Russell that she had had a phone conversation earlier that evening with Craig Daly, who is Nikki's father, and that the phone conversation lasted 107 minutes. I think she probably said 2 hours, but we know that the phone call was 107 minutes. Even giving this information, he doesn't say that this is the reason for the fight. Then he states that the two argued after this information, but it had nothing to do with Craig or that phone call. He said that he's not the jealous type, and that when she said that, he didn't even really pay much attention to it. He said the reason that they argued was because he was attending a 10-day culinary seminar in Ithaca, New York, and Stacy was unhappy that he was going. He said they argued over money and the fact that he was going by himself. Russell then tells police that it was at this point that Stacy went to the bedroom, and when she came back to the living room, she was holding a gun. It was Russell's Ruger Red Hawk 44 Magnum revolver that he kept in the closet. I don't know anything about guns, but based on what Nikki has done for research, this is a double action revolver. I guess a single has a light and smooth trigger pull with better accuracy, and then a double has a heavier, longer trigger pull that can hinder accuracy. According to Russell, he says that Stacy matter-of-factly tells him that she's going to shoot him, and he's like, what do you mean? And allegedly she shoots him and misses him. Now remember, this is his account. He said at this point, he then gets up and walks towards Stacy, and she walks to the bedroom and he follows her. He said at this point, she again repeats that she is going to kill him, and he reaches for her hand, and there's a scuffle for the gun, and at some point she was shot.
She goes into the bedroom and she comes back out. She has the gun in her hand and she cocks it back and she goes, "Russell, I'm gonna shoot you." And I put my hands up and I said, "Steph, what are we talking about here?"
What was the gun when it went off in relationship to you and her? Waist high, head high, in between you? Were you close together, far apart?
No, we were not far apart. We were close together. I can't give you exacts on that. It all happened so fast, I don't know. I mean, we were there was a struggle. Next thing I know, there was a pop and she dropped. And I didn't want to be accused of murder, of anything like that. I picked up the gun. I put it in the holster. I put it back in the closet. I brought it back down and I said, no, I mean, that's stupid. I mean, it's happened. There's nothing you can do about it at this point. And I set it back on the ground. And then you guys came. We had whatever, a good and semi-bad relationship, just as relationships go. And after the first time, I mean, the gun was never grabbed before.
Now, I don't know why, but it is my opinion, just going off of the case files, that it appears from this point, Russell's statements were taken as fact, and he was he's seen as a witness. After providing that initial statement at the house, Russell is then placed into the same police car as Nikki and Christina, and Nikki describes this moment vividly. She still remembers feeling so uncomfortable with him getting close to her. She says that this is not something that he did. Like, he was not her father. They weren't like cuddly and, super close. Didn't show a lot of affection, and he did. And he was like very nuzzled in her, saying that he was sorry and that he loved her and that he wanted to keep the family together. That's not what happened. Nikki went to go and live with her father, and Christina stayed living with Russell. And it appears that Christina was actually, it almost seemed like kind of kept away from people that she could repeat Poppy killed mommy, because she was saying that a lot. She had been interviewed a few times after that night and continued saying that her Poppy killed her mommy. But Nikki describes that they were kind of kept apart, and when they finally saw each other and she asked her what happened to her mom, she said mommy shot herself. Now, after Russell provided his initial version of events, he called the police on July 11th and asked them to come back to the house to go over everything again. This time when they arrived, he basically went through the same events, but he said that after she shot at him, he remained sitting on the couch for about a minute or two before getting up and then heading towards the bedroom. He now said as he was walking to the bedroom, he heard a shot, and when he entered the bedroom, Stacy was on the floor. So the investigators are like, okay, like this is quite a bit different. So you're saying that there was never a struggle, you never saw the gun go off, you weren't near her. And he said, yeah, after thinking about it, there was never a struggle for the gun. Now, his whole version of events is something that has made Nikki's fight for her mom so much harder, and just a reminder that when you can speak out and speak with victims' families, and specifically ask them, like for any clarification that you need or how you can support them in the most effective way possible, to focus on specific things that they need. It's so important to do that and learn more about the case directly from them. I don't really want to get, too into it or point fingers or, be rude or anything. There was a very huge creator on TikTok. Like, I'm talking millions of subs who covered the case, and just the way that it was presented, I don't even really believe like it was intended anyway from him. It was just the way I believe the audience wasn't given full context of the backstory or of official rulings from the medical examiner and police reports. It kind of insinuated that Russell's story was basically like the narrative, and Nikki was just like inundated with messages saying her mom deserved what happened to her because she had shot at Russell first. But we have to remember, this is Russell's version of events, and there is absolutely no evidence that this is actually what happened at all. In fact, the evidence actually supports that Stacy never touched the gun, and that she was most likely the one that was sitting on the couch when that first shot was fired. I'm also going to use protective language. I'm not stating this as fact. I'm just saying that if you go through the full report and you read everything, this is kind of what it looks like. And this is what the medical examiner also strongly believed. After concluding his tests and investigations, the medical examiner ruled that Stacy's death was a homicide. But despite that, there have never been any arrests made. There was none made then, and there have not been any arrests since. Now, the reason that the medical examiner believes that this was a homicide is because Stacy's hands were swabbed for gunshot residue, and on her left hand, it did come back positive on both sides of her left hand, but this does not confirm that she shot the gun. Stacy was right hand dominant. According to her family, she would never handle a gun. And the medical examiner believes that that residue supports the fact that her hand would have been in a defensive position at the moment that that gun was fired. Now, the gun and the holster were also tested for fingerprints, but unfortunately, they were not able to retrieve enough that was sufficient for identification, which is interesting to me because as per Russell's own confession, he had already admitted that his fingerprints were going to be on the gun. So it was like he was already explaining that if they did find them. And that's because he admitted to police that after the gun was shot, he picked up the gun, he put it back in the closet, and he paced around for a while. And then he said at some point he decided to put it back because what was done was already done and there was no going back. And then he put the gun down by Stacy's body. And I read this case file. It almost like felt like you were just reading like a thriller book. It's like there were moments of literally being able to see that like the dots were connecting. Like the investigation seemed to be going in the right direction. It seemed so, I don't want to use the word obvious because I'm not an expert, but like obvious. The investigator's right about having those same kind of concerns, like his story changing, him admitting to taking the gun and moving it after the fact. And it looked like it was all going towards an arrest. There was even a reenactment that was done with a female officer that was the same measurements as Stacy. I mean, I know like for the record, like oftentimes those types of experiments don't really hold a lot of weight, especially in court, but it does help an investigator get some insight. And based on those measurements, the report concluded that the officer who was I guess playing Stacy was unable to discharge the weapon with one hand by herself, but it was able to discharge like during a struggle and multiple actions and movements. Nikki's actually broken down some insight onto the gun, specifically about like the weight of it. So someone who is as inexperienced as me, it definitely helped. And so I guess this gun is the one that is referred to as like the Dirty Harry gun, Clint Eastwood. And in short, it packs a punch. The bullets are heavy. The gun itself is like 3 pounds, which probably doesn't sound like a lot, but specifically if you're not a like gun gal, like it's heavy. So somebody making the decision to shoot to hit, I don't think would take the chance of doing that in their non-dominant hand, especially when there's like weight to it. Again, this is just a thought, just my opinion, but personally, like that makes way more sense than what is being alleged. And due to the fact, unfortunately, that there were no witnesses besides Russell, there is no way to definitively, there we go, Sherrilyn, rule out suicide. And because of that, the case has remained open and no arrests have been made. The case has basically gone cold, but like I said, it's never been cold for Nikki or her family. And she is such a stark reminder of just like the everlasting effects of homicide and how it changes the complete course of an entire family's life. Their life has not been easy by any means. And it's a direct result of what happened to Stacy. A couple of years ago, Nikki's sister Christina reached out to her saying that the Sedona Police Department had contacted her. They were wanting to do like a staged kind of confrontation to have her ask Russell about what happened. And, everybody was really hopeful that there was going to be some movement. It didn't end up happening. And Nikki, who's expecting to also hear from the police and, be told that there's going to be a fresh set of eyes on the case. It goes, is a couple months goes by and realizes like nobody has reached out to me. So she ends up reaching out herself and very quickly realizes that, okay, if anything is going to be done now, we have to be the one to make the moves. That's because when she finally was able to get in contact with the investigator, the only question that basically was asked of Nikki was, what did you see that evening? And since she was asleep, she was pretty much considered no good for the case. And that is fair for that evening. But over the years, Nikki heard a lot and has a lot of information to provide and questions that need to be answered. For starters, after her mom's death, she went to go and live with her father, Craig, who was her mom's ex, who she had spoken to on the phone the night she died for 2 hours. And Craig talked a lot about that call with Nikki. He said that while they were catching up, it came out in the conversation that he was no longer with the gal that he had been with, and Stacy had been expressing how unhappy she was with Russell. And during the conversation, they had decided that they were going to give it another try. According to Nikki's dad, the plan was that when Russell was going to be leaving for his trip, a trip that he alleges she was upset about, but she was excited about because she's looking at this as an opportunity to pack up her children and leave and go and be with Craig again. So Craig seems to have, I would assume, some very useful information. Stacy's sister also supports the claim that when she got off the phone with Craig, she was in great spirit. Wendy had actually spoken to Stacy twice that evening, once before her conversation with Craig and once after. And on that first conversation, Wendy says that Stacy was resentful about Russell and the whole situation that was going on there with him just pouring everything into his work, and basically her feeling like he didn't even really care about the family. And then when she spoke to her the second time that evening after her phone call with Craig, she explained Stacy as very happy and excited. She could clearly distinguish that there was a difference in her demeanor from both calls that made her like notice, oh, okay, like good, she's in a good mood now. Now, despite Craig's claims and the fact that Russell himself has stated in every single interview, that is one thing that I will give him that has been consistent and hasn't changed. He has always brought up that he was aware that there was a 2-hour conversation. Even though he says it didn't bother him, that is always brought up, and he'll be like, it's the ex, but I don't care. So even, that's consistent. Craig was spoken to. He's only been spoken to one time. That makes no sense to me. He's one of the last people to speak with Stacy. And you could, have the argument of, okay, well, like they've gotten what they needed from that interview, c'est la vie, except for the fact that Stacy and Russell's employer and co-workers had been interviewed on multiple occasions. And so it's like they weren't even there or hadn't spoken to her, last that evening for so long, had been, or, a point of possible contention in that conversation. Why are they constantly being interviewed? And as per their accounts of Russell and Stacy, some of them said that Stacy was like more of the straightforward one and Russell was a little bit more laid back. Russell and Stacy's employer brought up that he could see how a fight could happen because of his career, because he noticed that she had, some animosity about Russell never really being home and putting so much into his job. And it's like, that's pretty biased. It's his restaurant. Of course, he's going to, defend the dude that's dedicating his life to working for him. I think it's worth mentioning, though, also that despite coworkers and Russell's family saying that he was, more of a timid person than Stacy, her close friends and family have said that she confided in them that he had been abusive towards her several times. I believe there was over 50 that her sister had said that she had told her about. And Stacy's own brother said that he was witness to an altercation where Russell was shoving Stacy and that it had gotten to the point where he had to intervene and get in between them. Now, most of this probably wouldn't have even been known about the investigation if the family didn't have to pretty much pull out teeth for the case file. Something that Nikki is still waiting on is that when it finally did arrive and she was given the explanation that they're dealing with old technology, there was only 176 pages of an over 400-page report. Within what she was given, though, something that stood out to Nikki was the phone records, and another thing that she really hasn't gotten a clear explanation on. Now, she can see on the phone records that call between her mom and her Aunt Wendy, the call between her father and her mother, the call again to her aunt, and then there's the 911 call. But before the 911 call, 4 minutes before it, in fact, Russell placed a call to his father. And this is a call that Nikki obviously believes was after the shooting to ask for advice. This could have been in those like frantic moments of trying to cover tracks, picking up the gun. We know that he picked up the gun and put it away. Was it his father that told him to put it back where it was by the body and call 911 for help? I mean, we don't know, but we know that it's never been explained. And to me, I think that that's okay. I think that is okay to have, go in on things and see that there were certain things that were missed. There's so many instances in cold case files where you are given those opportunities to go back and look at something with a fresh set of eyes, and it can be a game changer. But for some reason, that doesn't, seem to be getting done. It appears that there are definitely new avenues to explore, but they're not being explored. And I want to share a letter that was actually sent to Nikki and her aunt from the Sedona Police Department. And I think it'll just kind of give you some insight as to why they felt like their fight needed to become public and why they are really feeling alone in this fight for justice for Stacy. So the letter they received said, the current status of the case is inactive. This means the case will only be accessed when new viable information, evidence, or leads are reported. Periodic reviews of the case will be made by the assigned investigator to review any new evidence or leads. Many police officers and detectives have investigated this case since 1993. After completion of the initial investigation, the case was submitted in consideration of filing charges at the Yavapai County Attorney's Office, but they declined prosecution. There is not another charging body or agency that has the authority to bring charges in this case. Jurisdiction for charging remains with the Yavapai County Attorney's Office. And while that can be true, I'm lost at the very beginning where it's like that they're focused on like new evidence or leads, and you don't really find new evidence, I guess, after all of that. But in my opinion, based on what they do have in the same case file, that, I mean, they're seeing even more than I was seeing. There are people to follow up with. Reinvestigations into this case have been made, during which leads have been tracked down to include interviews and attempts to contact a suspect. During this latest reinvestigation effort, the suspect was not able to be contacted in person or by electronic means. Please note, any contact with a suspect by law enforcement at this point must be consensual, and the suspect cannot be forced to speak or answer questions should they choose to decline the opportunity for an interview. I can't imagine how infuriating that would feel, especially when you are looking at a case file and evidence that shows that that suspect has lied numerous times, changed their story numerous times, and is just being treated like they can come if they decide to. Now, attempts to intimidate and harass police personnel involved in this investigation, including sworn, non-sworn, legal, or clerical personnel, cannot be tolerated. The level of repeated demands as well as online attacks of the police personnel on their private social media pages is inappropriate and could rise to the level of harassment. My understanding of this is just like for Nikki, like having a TikTok and starting a YouTube and talking about her mom's case and reading. Literally, her channel had actually been just like reading the case file. So it was just like documents pertaining to her mom's case. Requests for material related to this case are in progress through our record department and will be available as soon as possible. We're dealing with old technology and working diligently to provide an accurate, complete case file. So as of, the time of me reporting on this, Nikki has not been given the full case file. And then it's signed Lieutenant Carl Wack. So as mentioned in there, they basically say, like, unless there's more leads that come or new evidence, they really can't do anything. But somebody else that Nikki has spoken to is the woman that was briefly married to Russell. They actually had a son after Stacy's death. And according to Nikki, this woman told her that Russell talked about that night with her. His ex claims that he told her that prior to calling 911, not only did he tamper with evidence by putting the gun back in the closet, but he also had taken a shower and put clothes in the washing machine. Allegedly, she also said that while he was drinking, he confessed to her. And when Nikki told me this, like, my jaw dropped because, again, I'm not a professional. I'm not an investigator, but I know that one thing that investigators wait for is for a suspect to divorce or separate from a partner after a murdered partner because of what they possibly could have been told or confessed to about that prior partner. To me, it makes no sense how she has not been spoken to, how Craig has only been spoken to once when he is literally the one who spoke to her for 2 hours the last night of her life. And like I said, I can't even go and blame the initial investigators on this. There's a lot of weight that needs to be on the Yavapai attorney's office because, with the whole case file, they had declined to press on. And I there is a transcript in there where, like I said, it was like I couldn't believe what I was reading. The detectives absolutely did point out to him, like, these are our concerns. You have made very inconsistent statements. He admits that he knows that he has. And it seems like they're like closing in on him. And his answers are like, I'd actually like to, I want to read some of them with you just so that you can kind of get a sense of like what I was reading. So there's one area here where the investigator actually talks about her firing the gun and how that statement of his doesn't make sense based on the medical examiner's findings. And they say, they believe the evidence from the medical examiner shows that she is in a defensive position with her left hand, meaning that there was some evidence that showed that she was pushing the gun away with her left hand. And he says, And they say, like, that's one of the reasons why they say, like, not like we believe, they're saying that it wasn't a suicide. So when they say that, like, this is the medical examiner's opinion, how do you explain that? Like, how do you explain that defensive residue, I guess, or like the belief that is what it was? And he just said, yeah, I can't explain it. And they're even like saying to him, like, we understand, like, this could have been exactly how you explained it in the first case, like where there was a struggle of sorts and that this was an accident. You did not intend. This was, a heat of passion, whatever. Things got too far. We just want to know what happened. And Nikki's even brought this up and she said, at this point, it's like, I'm more frustrated with all of what's happened after the fact and how we've been treated now to just reinvestigate and look into this, that he's being treated like, like this reliable witness. She's like, he could have already done his time by now. If this was, a manslaughter case, he would have been long out of jail and we would have some form of answers and closures. And now she's just, they feeling like the world is against her getting justice for her mom. And this is one part that I also want to bring up within one of these exchanges, in 93, because as I'm going to wrap up, we'll go over what the current investigator said. So basically, they do say to Russell, like, okay, when there are inconsistencies in a statement, it's usually, you'll forget that from like the get-go if it's like a traumatic event. And so they're saying like, but you're not going to, I guess, like make up something that didn't happen in those early hours, especially as far as saying that you were trying to stop something from happening, that there was a struggle like that intense from that first statement. And then once you've had time to kind of sit on it, then that that changes. And it coincidentally changes where now you've actually completely removed yourself from even being a witness to that exact moment. And so when he's asked about those things, he doesn't have an explanation. They said, like, how can you explain like getting that so confused? And he just said, I can't. They also go on to say that, any times that they have had, reached out for further follow-up questions to clarify those types of questions, it was very difficult to get a hold of him. He had agreed to go in and do a polygraph and help with the reenactment and didn't. And so they're like, if we want to support what you're saying and these things could help in that situation, we're kind of left with not really much to go on when when you're now kind of hard to get a hold of and almost becoming at this point uncooperative because we have questions about what you provided when you were being cooperative, if that makes sense. And he says straight up, like verbatim, I don't have anything else to add. Like, I want this all to be over. Literally says, I want this to be over. And it's like, well, yeah, I would too if there was heat on me, I guess, and I was about to face consequences for my alleged actions. But that's not the way it works. It's like, if we do something, we need to make it right. And so that was what was frustrating, because as I'm reading, I'm like, okay, like how did we end up here? It totally sounds like we're all on page. And basically that interview ended with him saying that he had a lot to do to prepare for the upcoming long weekend. And like, if they, needed anything or if he thought of anything, he would let them know. And he was absolutely free at that time to go. There was nothing that they could go on for charges. They were still in the middle of their investigation and was wanting to present everything fully for their case to move forward. Even though they didn't get a confession, the investigators at the Sedona Police Department felt like with the medical examiner ruling and then just based off of the evidence and interviews that they had conducted with, like their investigation, like all of their reports say like they are investigating a homicide. The medical examiner rules confidently that this was a homicide. And so when that was presented to Yavapai County Attorney's office, they did not feel as though there was enough evidence to prove a homicide. And so they couldn't proceed past that investigative stage without more cooperation. Now, the initial investigator that was put on for like a fresh look was actually removed from the case because of statements that he had made about the case and like how it was going, and basically the family. I would have been so upset if I was Nikki. His name is Detective Dominguez, and there is a news report where he basically had said that he was looking back into the case. He was going to do so with an unbiased mind, and he said that based on what he was seeing in the report, he did feel like something happened that night that was not listed in the documents, but he couldn't be sure what that was. And for him, and I feel like this is kind of where the case has now shifted to not being able to rule out suicide as the possibility, again, just based on Russell's change of events, saying that he was not in the room, therefore she must have done this by herself. And, some of the argument of being like, okay, well, can we rule out suicide? Can we not? Is that her wound was a contact wound. So the gun was, placed on her neck. It was on the left side. She was right-handed. And so that didn't make sense for the family, on top of a lot of things that didn't make sense for the family, that she wouldn't do that. She wasn't suicidal, wouldn't leave her kids. Their dog was put out, late at night when she had already gone to the washroom and the yard wasn't fenced, so they never did that, But then there's the argument that did he possibly put the dog out so that the dog didn't protect her in this argument that was going on? Like there's so many things that don't lead to suicide, and that didn't even seem to really be like a thought in the initial investigation, but is like quite heavily focused on now. And the statement that was made by Detective Dominguez was that if you are solely focused on the fact that this was a right-handed individual and that they could have only used their right hand, it's not practical. And that's he's not wrong. He also admits, though, that the trajectory would have been difficult. He's like, is it impossible? No. So he says that his quote was that the family was over-focused on the fact that she was right-handed and that she could have not done this with her right hand. And not that they were over-focused. It was just a fact that was brought up on top of other things like that did not add up to suicide. Certainly one of the main ones being that the initial statement was that there was an argument and a struggle for the gun, and that there are potential witnesses who potentially were given a confession. So he said that anybody that is using the fact that she didn't use her dominant hand as a theory as to why this wasn't suicide, you need to take that with a grain of salt. And then he said that he does a lot of things in his life with his left hand, even though that he's right hand dominant. And then he used the argument that generally when there is a suicide, there is a connection with the skin to the weapon. He does point out that that is just that it's a statistic, not a suicide. And yes, generally in suicide, the weapon is placed against the body at the time of the discharge. However, that's usually not the conventional spot to do it. 75% of suicides by a firearm are injuries to the head, followed by the chest, which was 15%, and then the abdomen, which was 3%. And now his explanation for what he thought when he was looking at the case file, reading the multiple interviews and the inconsistencies, he said that he expected to see somebody have a variation to their story. He said that he's more suspicious if someone's story is exactly the same and there's no different than the first time. And then he said, like variations are human nature because it's easy for us to forget things. And he said that his story, he did agree. Russell's story had changed a few times, but he said that it was content wise. And when I read that, let us just put out a disclaimer, Sherrilyn, I am not an investigator and I am so aware of that. But that was like, what? This isn't just like, I turned left into the bedroom, but really I turned right. Or like I had 4 glasses of wine, but really I think it was only 3 or maybe 2. Those types of things I feel are like content. This is a physical interaction and struggle. Something that little 3-year-old Christina told multiple officers that she saw. Like, she said she saw her poppy kill her mommy. Russell himself also admits that at one point when he was in the bedroom, again, that has changed. Was he in the bedroom right when the gun was fired? Was he in the living room and walking up? Regardless, he has said that while he was in the bedroom, he looked in the hall and then he did see his daughter standing there. And aware that he knew that she was saying this, his explanation for it was that she just must have been confused. Now, Detective Dominguez finished off that interview by saying that there were too many inconsistencies and that short of a confession, he would not send this case to prosecution. And I just to put that, to put that out there and say yeah, he doesn't want to talk to us. He doesn't have to. And unless he confesses, there's, really this is going on. I cannot imagine the rage, I guess. I feel rage right now, but just insult and just feeling so let down and unsupported like Nikki must feel. Now, the family's quest for assistance actually got to the point of getting help from an investigator from the FBI to look into the case, which is huge. I can't even think of working directly with a family where, that's what kind of what you dream of. It's just getting to that next point outside of the county. And then another roadblock happened when the Sedona Police Department rejected their assistance from the FBI to intervene and help. And without that permission of saying, yeah, we will accept the assistance from you, they can't just go and override. They need the approval. And the Sedona Police Department wouldn't give it to them. And it's I couldn't believe that. It's been 30 years. I can understand it is in those early stages there, especially, in the 90s, 80s, we saw much more cases where there was kind of this like fight for power. And if there were conflicting jurisdictions, no one wanted to share the evidence that they had, or suspects that they were looking into, or witnesses that they had, because they wanted to be the one to like solve it. But it's been 30 years. It is beyond the point, in my opinion, of having the luxury to just like reject help that is being offered to you. I personally, feel just like based on what we've been able to go through together here in this episode, like there are so many questions still to ask, people to visit or revisit. First, Nikki's father, Craig, being one of them. Second, Russell's ex-wife after Stacey died, obviously Russell too. Now, like I said, that investigator is no longer on the case, but unfortunately, the family has not had any luck with the new detective, Detective Leon, that is put on the case. Basically, she's also said like pretty much the same thing, that they need a confession. I don't know if they can go back and be like to the FBI, like, okay, we changed our mind, like, please come and help. I think that would be useful. At this point, though, Nikki is not giving up. And I know, like without even having known her personally or for a long time, you can absolutely get the fight that this woman has, and she will not stop until she gets justice for her mother. And it infuriates me that it has to be this hard for her to do. So there are tons of ways that you guys can get involved. First of all, head on over to Nikkis Tik Tok, because she is constantly keeping everybody in the loop, whether it has to do with her mom's case, kind of where she is with detectives. She also shares like beautiful photos and videos of her mom. She'll also update you with upcoming podcasts, episodes done by other people. But the most exciting thing that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode is that you can get involved through a documentary that is getting done for her. So right now they are in the crowdfunding stages, and there is a link in her TikTok that you can go to. I'll also put the link in the description so that it's easy to find. And there are different tiers of donations that you can choose. So, I mean, even up to you having like your name in the credits, which I think is so phenomenal, and something that, you could be really proud of seeing and knowing that you were a part of supporting this, fight for justice for Stacey. I have no doubt in my mind there is going to be movement here in the case, especially once there is a documentary done and there are much more eyes and ears on this case, and that's exactly what the family deserves. So to be a part of that, I think is really, really special and important too. Like, it's for the family. I've mentioned it so many times, like all of this has so many costs associated to it, costs that you're not prepared to, fund and fork over. So having listeners and viewers support is so crucial in these times. All right, you guys, that is it for me today. I hope to be able to see some Sippendale familiar names on the credits there. I have no doubt that definitely we will have, Nikki will have some support from a few of you. Go and send her some love. If you can't donate, just going over to her TikTok and sharing her story and following and liking and commenting and sending her Sippendale love really helps that platform gain exposure too. So you don't have to monetarily support if you are not in the position to do so right now. Just engaging with her is massive, and she's primarily over on TikTok. So go and tell her hi, send her some love, and let her know that I sent you. All right. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe so that I can continue helping people with my platform as well. You have no idea how much a like and a comment can go with, boosting me up and gaining exposure. Like I said in the last video, I've got some big channel goals on the route to 500,000, baby. We can do it. So make sure you subscribe. I appreciate you so much. I will see you in the next episode. I will miss you terribly until then. I am having fun on lives though, so I'll probably see you in a live before the next video. And so come and say hi to me. And where was I with my whenever I get sidetracked on a new outro, I just forget what I'm freaking saying. I will miss you terribly until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.